Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for Who Writes Peru, a reading from the September Asian Peruvian issue of Words Without Borders. I'm Susan Harris, the editorial director of Words Without Borders. Before we get started, since we may have some first-time Zoomers joining us, some Zoom tips. You'll see some buttons at the bottom center. Please keep yourself muted. You can open chat and drop questions for our readers, and we'll give them a chance to answer them at the end of the reading. In the upper right, you'll see a couple of options, gallery view and speaker view. We recommend speaker view so you'll see the readers. We also have closed captioning available. To turn it on, just click the arrow next to CC and show subtitles. My colleague Nina Parata will be dropping various links into the chat as I mention them. The illustrator who produced the artwork, which reflects themes and events in the issue content and was done specifically for this event, is Vic Liu. Thank you, Vic. Quickly, some words about Words Without Borders. We're an online magazine of international literature founded in 2003. Over the last 17 years, we've published over 2,500 writers, poems, short stories, essays from 139 countries, translated from 125 languages. We work to build bridges between authors, translators, publishers, and readers. I encourage you to visit Words Without Borders to read more excellent writing from the issue, as well as essays, interviews, and other content on our blog, Words Without Borders Daily. Our virtual gala, by the way, is coming up October 27th. For more info and to buy tickets, you can go to the link in the chat. We're delighted to bring you these selections from our September issue, Who Writes Peru? Asian Peruvian Literature. The issue was guest edited by Jennifer Shyue, who will be our host tonight. Jennifer is a translator from Spanish, focusing on contemporary Cuban and Asian Peruvian writers. She was the recipient of a 2019 Fulbright grant to Peru, and she can be found on the web at shue.co. That's SHYUE.co. And she can be found here with us tonight. I'll turn things over to Jennifer.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Susan. Buenas noches con todas, todas y todos. I'm very excited to present some of the voices in the current issue of Words Without Borders. In the issue are poems, short stories, a novel excerpt, and a crónica by 7 Peruvian writers of Chinese and Japanese descent. This is not meant to be an exhaustive catalog of all the writers to whom these labels might apply, but is rather a slice of work by some of the most vibrant voices in contemporary Peruvian literature. Our readers tonight are Sui-Yun, Siu Kam Wen's translator Julie Hempel, Doris Moromisato and her translator Margaret Wright, Julio Villanueva Chang and his translator Nicolás Medina Mora, Wong Kcomt and her translator, me, and Tilsa Otta and her translator Jacob Steinberg. I'm also thrilled to share that we'll be hearing from Michelle Har Kim, translator of the late poet José Watanabe, who is not in the issue but is a giant of Peruvian letters. We won't be able to read everything in the issue tonight, so I encourage you to visit Words Without Borders to read more. Our first reader will be Sui-Yun, reading 3 poems. Sui-Yun is the daughter of Chinese immigrants from Zhongshan, Guangdong. Her published works include Creciente, Rosa Fálica, Cantos para el Mendigo y el Rey, Soy un Animal con el Misterio de un Ángel, and Sueño de Otorongo, the collection these 3 poems are from. She'll be reading both the Spanish and the English, which is my translation. Sui-Yun's voice joins us by recording. You'll find a link to these poems in the chat, as well as Sui-Yun's email. She welcomes any questions you might have after the reading. And now I'm going to share the recording.
Raíz de ciertos robles, crece mi rubor con sabor a manzana, y es mi sueño el que yace lánguida, como ostra en la alcoba. On the roots of certain oaks, my blush grows up, lies languid, like an oyster in the chamber, apple flavor.
I'm going to replay that.
On the roots of certain oaks, My blush grows apple flavored, and it's my dream that lies languid like an oyster in the chamber. Del sonido del alba, apresan tus manos la luz de los cerros sobre tus rodillas, y un parasol cubre mis venas, el cosquilleo tierno de las grullas, mientras tu simiente nace en el árido cantar de los chaucos, allí donde los declives deleitan el surco de tu mirada. From the sound of dawn, your hands seize the light of the hills over your knees, and a parasol covers my veins, the tender tickle of the cranes, while your seed is born in the chauco's arid song, there where the slows delight the furrow of your gaze. A Eva, mi Madre Eterna, para borrar mis pecados, he lamido la punta del mal. Yo sé que Eva hizo lo mismo. Nuestras ansias acabaron succionando las astas de los árboles, extrayendo gota a gota la savia del manzano. Para apartarme del mal, he atiborrado mis tinajas de lúgubres recuerdos, llamando a las cenas ignotas que emanan de mi cuerpo. Para apartarme del mal, he añadido cada letra de tu cuerpo en mi cuerpo, tatuándome toda. To Eve, my eternal mother, to erase my sins, I have licked the tip of evil. I know if did the same, our longings ended up sucking at the shafts of trees, extracting, drop by drop, the sap of the apple branch. To turn away from evil, I have crammed my jars full of somber recollections, calling to the unknown silks radiating from my body. To turn away from evil, I have added every letter of your body to my body, tattooing myself whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, and thank you, Sui-Yun. If you're just joining us and would like to look at the accessibility packet, it can be downloaded via the chat. You can also turn on closed captioning by clicking on the button below that says CC. Next, we have Julie Hempel reading an excerpt of her translation of Siu Kam Wen's story, The Final Stretch. Julie Hempel is a translator from Spanish. Her primary interests are Mexican literature and works by Asian Peruvian writers. She teaches at Austin College, where she is the director of the Center for Southwestern and Mexican Studies. She has translated works by Aurora Velasco, Carmen Villoro, Eric de Luna, and Siu Kam Wen. A link to their story, The Final Stretch, can be found in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you, Words Without Borders. The short story by Siu Kam Wen, which appears in this issue of Words Without Borders, is the title story of his groundbreaking collection, El Tramo Final, or The Final Stretch. This collection of short stories, first published in 1985, opened a window into Lima's Barrio Chino. Through Siu's wide range of characters, young and old, men and women, Cholas, Mestizas, Chinese, Tucson, and Nikkei, this vibrant community truly comes to life in Peruvian narrative for the first time. I will first read a short excerpt from the original Spanish and then an excerpt from the English translation. Al irse envejeciendo y al mudarse fuera del barrio, Apo fue perdiendo gradualmente los escasos amigos y conocidos que tenía y, al final, ya no podía entenderse sino con sus dos hijos y con algunas familias que, como lo habían sido los Choi, le tocaban en suerte de inquilinos o de vecinos. Apo jamás llegó a entenderse con sus nietos, que más se parecían a Mercedes que a Lou Chen, y ellos, por su lado, tampoco se esforzaron en entenderse con su abuela, ocupados como estaban en cosas más mundanas y más divertidas. A principios de diciembre, Lou Chen, que vino a llevarla a una cena en la mansión, la notó sumamente decaída y envejecida, y le preguntó que si no quería venirse a vivir con ellos de nuevo. No, amén, respondió la anciana. Estoy perfectamente bien con tu hermano. Y no estoy enferma, si eso es lo que tú piensas. Lou Chen, que conocía bien el carácter de su madre, no insistió. And in English, when Lou Chen, loan shark and owner of a fleet of 18 urban minibuses, managed to amass his first 15 million, he had a luxurious mansion built in Monterrico and moved there with his Peruvian wife, their 2 sons, and his elderly mother. The 2-story house measured 2,300 square feet and included a spacious front yard and a backyard with a pool. 2 imposing German shepherds guarded the house against thieves from the rooftop, given that Monterrico was at that time a recently developed area and thus lacked adequate police surveillance. The household duties were performed by 2 housekeepers, Arminda, a hefty 40-something chola who had been in charge of the kitchen at the old house, and Julia, the former's niece, a blossoming young woman. A part-time gardener came every Saturday to cut the grass, trim the bushes, clean the pool, and court the girl who had caught his eye. Mercedes, Lou Chen's wife, a robust mestiza who was talkative and generous at heart, set about ordering new dresses made in honor of her move to the glittering new mansion. Every weekend, she drove downtown in her Fiat, returning each time with a new hairdo and smelling strongly of shampoo and hairspray. As for Juan Carlos, the firstborn son, always in style when it came to clothing, it did not take long for him to be seen strolling around with his new girlfriend. She was a plump, dark-skinned girl, the daughter of a lawyer who lived just a few yards from the mansion in a smaller and less ostentatious bungalow. The younger son, Francisco José, preferred to continue dating his girlfriend from before, Anise. He made a habit of borrowing his mother's Fiat whenever it was available and picking up his girl in Lince, bringing her out to the mansion to swim in the pool on the weekends. Of course, Lou Chen would not be left behind in a situation like this. 2 weeks after moving into the new house, Lou Chen, who had begun to go gray in the last few years, appeared one morning, to the disbelief of many of his friends, without a single gray hair on his head. The elegant mansion, the luxurious swimming pool, and the certainty of being the envy of his neighbors must have exercised some psychological effect on the profiteer's state of mind. Otherwise, how would one explain the dyeing of his hair or the recent attention to his wardrobe? His 3-piece suits no longer looked as if they had been fashioned in the 50s. They were now more fitted with bell-bottom trousers. In a word, the occupants of the elegant new mansion were in harmony with their surroundings, or strove fervently to be so. The only exception was Apo, Lou Chen's mother, who clashed like a dissonant note in the midst of such style and luxury. Apparently, she had not realized that there was a certain moral obligation, not written but understood, that owners or occupants of a new house, especially when dealing with a true mansion, would honor its appearance in kind. To not comply with such an obligation was tantamount to the unforgivable sin of blasphemy within the confines of a church. It resulted in desecration. Apo had turned 72 the previous August. She was a short, thin, elderly woman who wore her gray hair in the traditional way of the haka, up in a bun. Her dresses were old-fashioned, even when compared to those of other women her age. She preferred trousers to skirts. Her Chinese-style pants were narrow at the bottom and always looked 2 inches shorter than they should be, revealing part of her white cotton socks. These pants had been fashioned some 10 years prior, before arthritis had impeded her use of her old German sewing machine. The old woman refused to wear any clothing she had not sewn herself. And since she had been physically unable to do so for some time, all of her dresses looked worn out and faded, though admirably clean. Years before, Lou Chen, somewhat embarrassed by the sad state of her clothing, had ordered the purchase of several dresses in the downtown department stores and given them to her on Mother's Day. But Apo had never worn any of them. She refused to wear any Western-style clothing No, her refusal to wear any Western-style clothing caused her son more than a few headaches. He felt ridiculous each time he went out in public with his mother. The elderly woman's appearance was at odds with the flashy Mustang in which she rode. Her daughter-in-law's fur coats and her son's recently acquired bourgeois air. It had the deplorable effect of reminding Lo Chen of his humble origins as an upstart and proclaiming said beginnings to the whole world. A few months after moving into the new house, while the family ate in the spacious dining room, illuminated by large picture windows, Apo announced to everyone's surprise that she was going back to live in the old house. Lo Chen raised his head from his plate, finding it hard to believe his ears. "What did you say, Ama?" "I said I'm going to move back to the old house," answered the elderly woman. "But what old house are you talking about?" continued Lo Chen, still perplexed. "Remember that we rented the apartment where we lived before to Lo Choi." Apo's daughter-in-law and grandchildren listened to the conversation with curiosity, but did not understand a single word that was said since the two spoke in Hakka. "I'm not talking about where we lived before," explained Apo. I want to go live with your brother, Ah Seng." "And can you tell me why you want to go to live with Ah Seng?" Lo Chen started to lose his patience. "Isn't this house better than that big old adobe house where he lives like a rat?" Lo Chen suddenly felt humiliated. "So," he said to himself, with a tinge of bitterness, "in the end, my brother is still the favorite son. My fortune has done me little good." His wife set her fork to the side and wiped her mouth with a napkin. "What's going on with Apo?" she asked, intrigued. "She wants to go to live with Ah Seng," Lo Chen replied gruffly in his broken Spanish. "And why does she want to live there?" asked Mercedes. Lo Chen shrugged his shoulders in response. "Your brother lives alone and has no domestic help. Who will take care of her?" "That's precisely what I'm thinking," said Lo Chen. "Try talking some sense into her if you can." Lo Chen's wife tried to change the old woman's mind with the few isolated words that the latter somewhat understood, but Apo stubbornly stuck to her guns, shaking her head back and forth in response to all the arguments and pleas of her robust and loquacious daughter-in-law. Mercedes finally surrendered.
Thank you, Julie. Now we'll hear from Doris Moromisato and Margaret Wright, who will be taking turns reading the Spanish and English of two of Doris's poems translated by Margaret. Doris Moromisato Lima, 1962, is the daughter of Japanese immigrants to Peru from Okinawa. A poet, fiction writer, and essayist, she has published 4 books of poetry and 2 collections of crónicas. Margaret Wright is a writer and translator from New Jersey. Her poems have appeared in the Brooklyn Review. A fun fact about Margaret is that her grandfather is from Arequipa in Peru. Maya Jaggi, Words Without Borders critic at large, actually reported from Arequipa for her recent feature titled White City Blues in Arequipa, Peru's Writers Face the Legacies of Racism and Colonialism. You can find a link to that feature in the chat, where you will also find a link to Doris and Margaret's poem, Here in Chotillos.
Thank you so much, Jen, and everyone at Words Without Borders for making this possible. This poem is called Here in Chotillos. Here I say again that I don't love you, while city mist loosens the sky, dampens my geraniums. Grounded like a gull on the terrace, I recall the sermon at Benares and agree. Suffering lives in me. During the festival of San Pedro, the fishermen sling their offerings to the sea. My eyes fill with rowboats, and the sprawl of petals taken by the tide shows me how small vastness is. I lower my forehead, not watching the water that keeps me from your mouth. I shut my eyes and sink the boats that never bring me to you. Everything is suffering, the great Sakya teaches me, and there is no one to beg or ask forgiveness for this love. Here I say again that I don't love you, that everything is fleeting, save this suffering. Migrating gulls on the horizon, loose threads of water, the city's mist on my hair.
Aquí en Chorrillos. Aquí repito que no te amo, mientras la garúa deshilacha el cielo, moja mis geranas. Varada en la terraza cual gaviota, evoco el sermón de Benaret y asiento que el dolor habita en mí. En la fiesta de San Pedro los pescadores arrojan sus ofrendas al mar. Mis ojos se llenan de barcas y los pétalos que la corriente esparce me demuestran cuán pequeña es la inmensidad. Yo bajo la frente para no mirar el agua que me separa de tu boca. Cierro los ojos para que naufraguen todas las barcas que nunca me llevan a ti. Todo es dolor, me enseña el gran Sakya. Y nadie hay para suplicar ni pedir perdón por este amor. Y repito que no te amo, que todo es efímero salvo este dolor. Gaviotas migran en el horizonte, hilachas de agua, garúa sobre mi pelo.
And this poem is called Allegory. All my visions exalt you and play on your chest, unbridled, shuddering mare crossing the prairie. All the storms unleash in your belly and flood the dark valley where I look for you, hopeless. All the rain-bent light is born in your face, your yellow eyes, your green hair, your every color mouth. All your orgasms shelter in my ear, all your pulses in my fingertips, but you begin to dim like a dream in the hill of my pubic bone that plays alone at mastering the wind.
Alegoría. Todas mis fantasías te veneran. Trepidante yegua tramontando la pradera. Todas las tormentas se desatan en tu vientre e inundan el oscuro valle donde te busco desesperada. Todos los arcoíris nacen en tu cara, tus ojos amarillos, tu pelo verde, tu boca multicolor. Todos tus orgasmos se refugian en mi oreja, todos tus latidos en la yema de mis dedos. Pero empiezas a esfumarte como un sueño en la colina de mi pubis, que juega sola a domar el viento. Muchas gracias Margaret, muchas gracias Jennifer, Susan. Gracias a Margaret, los poemas suenan tan bonitos en inglés. Muchísimas gracias a todos y a la revista.
Gracias a ti.
Thank you, Doris and Margaret. Just a reminder that if you're in need of an accessibility packet and/or closed captioning, those are available via the chat and the button below that says CC. Next up are Julio Villanueva Chang and his translator, Nicolás Medina Mora, who will be reading in Spanish and English from Life is a Pose. Julio Villanueva Chang is the founding editor of Etiqueta Negra, a nonfiction magazine in Spanish. He earned the Premio de Crónicas from the Inter-American Press Association. He has published De Cerca Nadie es Normal, an anthology of profiles he has written over the years, and Un aficionado a las tormentas, a selection of his articles. His texts have been translated into 6 languages and published in numerous international publications. Nicolás Medina Mora is a writer and translator. He lives in Mexico City, where he works as an editor at Revista Nexos. The link to their crónica is in the chat.
Thanks very much, Jennifer, and thanks to Words Without Borders for inviting us. Alfonso Reyes, the great Mexican essayist, wrote that the crónica, the Latin American crónica, was a centaur genre, half narrative and half essay. This is a very apt description of Julio Villanueva Chang's profile of the oldest life drawing model in Lima, Life is a Pose. Adelante, Julio.
La vida es una pose. Modelo de Escuela de Bellas Artes, cumple 50 años desnudándose. Rodolfo Munoz Del Rio ha pasado la mayor parte de su vida calato, desnudo, desde hace medio siglo, Los alumnos de la Escuela Nacional de Bellas Artes lo miran no como a un ser humano, sino como a una combinación de proporciones y claroscuros, un dibujo condenado a no moverse entre 7 y 12 horas diarias, un dibujo de 66 años que se ha pasado la vida desnudo y cuyo máximo esfuerzo ha consistido en tratar de no hacer nada, de no pestañear, de no rascarse la nariz, de ser indiferente a las moscas, al aburrimiento y al frío. Pero este espíritu de posada discreción se ha acomodado mal en el exhibicionismo de su carne. Porque ese dibujo animado es también una imagen publicitaria de sí mismo, un cuerpo chismoso de sus virtudes elásticas, un narciso que quiere figurar en el Guinness. Porque para Muñoz del Río, la vida es una pose. Tal vez por ello, el acontecimiento más triste de su vida haya sido el robo de las mejores pinturas que en los últimos 50 años habían hecho de él. De su diminuto cuarto de la Quinta Jeren, en Barrios Altos, también se llevaron un espejo de cuerpo entero y ahora no puede terminar de mirarse por completo. Al menos ha dejado de contemplar esos pies que le disgustan porque son enormes en comparación con esa pequeñez dibujada hacia arriba. Aunque Francis Bacon haya escrito para su felicidad, cito, no hay belleza excelente que no tenga algo raro en su proporción. Muñoz del Río también ha dejado de admirar esos pectorales, piernas y pantorrillas que le sirvieron para quedar en el tercer lugar de un Mr. Perú en los años 50. Entonces era un Hércules y se veía todas sus películas. En sus ratos libres se viste. Por las mañanas empieza haciendo un garabato, un boceto cuando cambia de posición cada 5 minutos, un estudio anatómico cuando posa por 45. El modelo yace como un Adán recién caído en la posición de un hombre que está tratando perpetuamente de levantarse. Los aprendices de Miguel Ángel lo empiezan a dibujar desde las piernas, unos desde la cabeza y otros desde el ombligo, pero todos terminan en un Muñoz ideal y platónico. Los griegos perfeccionaron el desnudo para que los hombres pudieran sentirse como un dios, pero la visión directa de la divinidad es insoportable a nuestros ojos. Tal vez a Muñoz del Río lo miran con la misma curiosidad oblicua con que se mira a un hombre atropellado. El tiempo aún no puede posarse sobre el cuerpo de quien tal vez sea el modelo más veterano del mundo. Tampoco la vergüenza. Cito, la naturaleza está desvestida en el momento que uno la busca. Usted agarra una flor y siempre está desnuda, dice Muñoz casi recitando. ¿Por qué habría de ir contra natura? La ropa ha identificado siempre al hombre como Homo sapiens, de ahí que la desnudez sea a veces vista como señal de privación económica o de locura. Pero también el desnudo es una forma de arte inventada por los griegos en el siglo V. Para ellos, la desnudez dejó de ser algo vergonzoso y ridículo y se convirtió casi en un culto religioso. Rodolfo Munoz Del Rio es el más griego de los descendientes de los incas, aunque su madre haya muerto creyendo que era un profesor de bellas artes. Como todo modelo plástico, no tiene su verdad desnuda, sino vestida. Hasta hacía unos años, sus hermanos creían que él enseñaba dibujo y pintura, y mientras Muñoz del Río enseñaba su anatomía en 300 poses, el portero de la escuela estaba entrenado para decir, espera un momento, voy a buscar al profesor. Y entonces el modelo de hermano se vestía como si estuviera en el Polo Norte y salía a recibirlos con un abrazo. Solo me quedaba ese pudor con la familia, admite el modelo, hoy vestido. Hasta que se exhibió impúdicamente en el programa de televisión Ocurrió Así, como uno de los modelos de arte más viejos del mundo, y sus sobrinos supieron por fin quién era su tío, que no hacía striptease ni pornografía, que era un profesional al servicio de las masas artísticas. A pesar de todo, Muñoz del Río desmiente estar enamorado de su cuerpo. Cito, los que están enamorados de él son los que dibujan un cuerpo más agradable del que yo tengo, deslinda con su sonrisa desdentada. Y es cierto, bien versa Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz que todo retrato no es más que un engaño colorido. Ante el cuerpo de un modelo posando desnudo, el instinto de los artistas no imita, sino perfecciona. A ellos no les molestan las arrugas, ni las bolsas de carne fofa, ni las siluetas vacilantes de los modelos veteranos. Menos aún la reposada vejez de Muñoz del Río, quien después de 50 años es un retrato de Dorian Gray al revés. Cuanto más envejece, más joven figura en los lienzos. El arte completa lo que la naturaleza no puede terminar, decía Aristóteles. Por el artista conocemos los objetos inalcanzados de la naturaleza. Entonces, Rodolfo Munoz del Río es solo un medium para conocer con impudicia la belleza, un pariente pobre de Narciso.
Muchas gracias, Julio. Thank you. Here's the translation. Rodolfo Munoz del Rio has spent the better part of his life in the nude, but naked. For the past half-century, students at Lima's Escuela Nacional de Bellas Artes have gazed upon him not as a human being, but as a configuration of shadows and proportions, a drawing condemned to sit still for 7 to 12 hours a day. A 66-year-old drawing whose greatest feat has been a heroic attempt to do nothing. No blinking, no scratching, an effort to become indifferent to flies, to boredom, to the cold. But this spirit of poise and discretion has settled uneasily into the exhibitionism of his flesh. That's because the living drawing is also an advertisement for himself, a body that brags of its powers of elasticity, and Narcissus angling for a spot in the Guinness Book of World Records. For Munoz, life is a pose. Perhaps the saddest event of his life was the theft of the best among the countless portraits that generations of art students have painted of him over 50 years. It was taken from his tiny room in Quinta Heren, Barrios Altos, along with his full body mirror, such that Munoz can no longer gaze at the whole of himself. His only consolation is that now he doesn't have to look at his feet, which he dislikes because they are too large for the slightness of a body sketched vertically. To his great relief, Francis Bacon wrote that there is no excellent beauty that hath not some strangeness in its proportion. But the truth is that Munoz del Rio has also ceased to admire the pectorals, thighs, and shanks that back in the 50s won him third place in the Mr. Peru contest. In those days, he was a Hercules who saw himself in every movie. In his spare time, he wears clothes. He begins the morning as a doodle, a preliminary sketch that changes position every 5 minutes. Then, after he stays put for 3/4 of an hour, he becomes an anatomical study. The model lies like a just fallen atom, a man perpetually striving to get up. Some apprentices begin with the legs, others head, others navel, but all of them end up reproducing the Platonic ideal of Munoz. The Greeks perfected the nude so that men could feel godlike, but our mortal eyes cannot gaze directly at divinity. The students look at Munoz del Rio with the oblique curiosity of passers-by staring at a man who's been hit by a car. Time has yet to make a dent in the man who might be the world's most senior model, and the same goes for shame. Nature is naked the moment one reaches for it, he says, almost as if reciting. You pick a flower, and it's already naked. So why would he go against nature? Clothes have identified human beings as Homo sapiens since time immemorial. This is why nakedness is often seen as a sign of poverty or madness. But the nude is also an art form invented by the Greeks in the 5th century BC. For them, nakedness ceased to be shameful or ridiculous and became instead something of a religious cult. Rodolfo Munoz del Rio is the most Grecian of the descendants of the Incas, and yet his mother died under the impression that he was a professor at Bellas Artes. Like every model, he clothes his truth. Until a few years ago, his sisters believed that he taught drawing and painting. And while Munoz del Rio bared his anatomy in 300 different poses, the guard at the school's gate was trained to say, "Wait a minute, I'll go fetch the professor," thus buying the model brother enough time to dress like he was heading to the North Pole and come out to greet his relatives with open arms. The only modesty I had left was with my family, the model, fully dressed, admits today. The deceit lasted until his nephew saw his shameless appearance on the television program Ocurrió Así, where he proudly came out as one of the world's oldest art models. Not a stripper or a pornographer, but a professional in the service of the art-making masses. Despite all that, Munoz Del Rio insists that he isn't in love with his body. Those who are in love with it are the ones who draw my body more beautiful than it really is, he parries with a toothless smile. And it's true. As Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz writes, portraits are nothing but colorful deceit. Faced with the body of a nude model, the artist's instinct is to improve rather than to imitate. Artists are unbothered by the wrinkles, the flaccid flesh, and the tremulous figures of veteran models. This is especially true of portraits of Munoz Del Rio dignified maturity, which after 50 years have come to resemble a reverse Dorian Gray. The older the man grows, the younger he looks on the canvas. Art completes what nature cannot bring to a finish, says Aristotle. The artist gives us knowledge of nature's unrealized end. Munoz Del Rio, then, is a medium that allows us to know beauty without reserve. Narcissus' down and out cousin. Thanks.
Thank you, Julio and Nicolas. Don't forget that if you would like to pose questions to any of our readers, you can put those questions in the chat and we'll ask them at the end. Next, we'll be hearing from Julia Wong Kcomt and from me, her translator. Julia Wong Kcomt was born into a Tusan, or Chinese Peruvian, family in Chapén, Peru in 1965. Her father was a well-known philanthropist in Macau who founded a project in 1995 to create public libraries and open spaces like parks and gardens. She traveled from an early age, and her perceptions of country borders, different cultures, and diversity in ethnicity and religion became a strong motivation to write. We'll be reading the true poems in the issue, the link to which is in the chat.
Un momentito porque acabo de tener un... Aquí está. Good evening, everyone. This is amazing, a well-done job from Jennifer, from Susan, from Julie, from everyone, because I think this is the first time that Japanese and Chinese Peruvian are sitting here in a common ground and speaking about poetry, and translators made that possible, because I think here in Peru we have a long story of very, very conflicted situations between Japanese and Chinese. So this is a very interesting space where we can get together. And I think the job was really, really big. I met Michelle Har Kim many years ago, and she started to translate Watta's, my favorite poet, with my help. And I thought that it's amazing that I can help someone to express my Peruvian feelings about Watanabe's and about poetry. So thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos por permitirnos este espacio de Palabras sin Fronteras, porque creo que es la primera vez que en un espacio literario nos reunimos, sobre todo multinacional, nos reunimos chinos y japoneses peruanos para leer poesía. Voy a leer El Gallo Rojo, que es un poema de mi libro Virreinato, publicado en Argentina por el Suri Porfiado. A Watta in memoriam. Se muere el Perú, como los ajos, este albur de camisas con maestría cortadas, las ventanas de fierro, barrocas, incesantes. La pintura manchando mis ovarios. Ahora el sushi se ha vuelto el idioma del pueblo. Y mis tallarines poderosos esperan en una olla olvidada. Papá me dijo que odiara a los japoneses, como dicen que odia a los chilenos, mas de tanto amor no encuentro diferencias entre el cerezo, la sakura, la flor de loto y el olivo. Jesucristo tamiza en el Atacama semillas de uva colorida. Se muere el Perú, Watta, y solo recuerdo lo que dijiste de mi tía. Estaba buena tu tía Carmen, no parecía china. Sonreí sin ofenderme, porque en el Perú nadie parece nada. Había un chifa, tomaba sopa guantán con tus amigos chinos, y mientras se buscaba un emblema que superara el 1,5 centímetros de diferencia en los párpados, un gallo rojo emitía un sonido más fuerte que la nada. Se nos muere el Perú. El canto del gallo volverá cuando vuele la piedra.
The Red Rooster. To Watta in memoriam. Peru dies. Like garlic bulbs, this whim of blouses cut so masterfully. The iron windows, Baroque, relentless, paint staining my ovaries. Sushi is now the language of the people, and my mighty noodles wait in a forgotten pot. Papa told me to detest the Japanese, like everyone says to hate Chileans, but with so much love, I find no difference between the cherry tree, the sakura, the lotus flower, and the olive bush. In the Atacama, Jesus Christ sifts through red grape seeds. Peru dies, Wata, and all I remember is what you said about my aunt. She was hot, your Aunt Carmen. She didn't look Chinese. I smile unoffended, because in Peru, nobody looks like anything. There was a chifa restaurant. You ate wonton soup with your Chinese friends, and as we searched for an emblem to overcome the 1.5 centimeters of difference in our eyelids, a red rooster loosed a sound louder than nothingness. Our Peru is dying. The rooster will sing again when the stone flies.
Y ahora Santa Inevitable es de Ladrón de Codornices, un poemario también editado y publicado en Argentina. Mientras acabe el invierno, su vals de pobre se apiada de mi pentagrama. Desde el Callao no precisa micro ni pericias. No camina, vuela. Come una tajada de palta conmigo. Murmura que me proteja de las mujeres, vehementes, católicas, las que escriben vida como en arena, las que dicen que no sé de versos, ni paladar de carne, que mi ropa es de mal gusto, que no sé escribir Perú ni castellano.
Inevitable Saint. As winter comes to an end, her pauper's waltz takes pity on my notes and stave. From Callao, she doesn't need buses or expertise. She doesn't walk, she flies, eats an avocado slice with me, and murmurs to protect myself from women, vehement Catholic, who write life as if in sand, and say I know neither verses nor flesh pleasures, that I have bad taste in clothes, and can't write Peru or Spanish. Thank you, Julia. And now we have Tilsa Otta and Jacob Steinberg, who will be reading bilingually from Tilsa's brand new novel, Las Niñas de Oro de Alquimia Sexual, The Golden Children of Sexual Alchemy, excerpts of which are translated by Jacob. Jacob will be joining us via video recording. Tilsa Otta is a writer and video artist. She has published 4 books of poetry, 1 story collection, 1 poetry book for children, and a comic book. She also directs audiovisual pieces and gives workshops on poetic creation for children and adults. Jacob Steinberg is the author of the poetry collections Magulladón and Ante ti se arrodilla mi silencio. As a translator, he has collaborated closely with Cecilia Pavón and Mario Bellatin, among others. The novel excerpts are linked in the chat. Tilsa, tu micro está.
Disculpen. Bueno, ahora sí, buenas noches a todos. Gracias, Jen, por la invitación, la introducción. Como dice Julia, por juntarnos, por reunirnos. Thank you, Susan, for having us here. So, quisiera hacer una pequeña introducción para explicar muy brevemente de qué trata la novela, para que los episodios que voy a leer estén en contexto, ¿no? Esta novela cuenta la historia de una chica llamada Christy que de pronto empieza a tener visiones del futuro cada vez que tiene un orgasmo con su novio. Entonces esto la perturba y la lleva a iniciar una investigación por los terrenos sobrenaturales y místicos para averiguar por qué está pasando esto y qué debe hacer ella con esta información y estas premoniciones, ¿no? Creo que Julie nos va a ayudar a traducir esto.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, she says. And she agrees with Julia Wong Kcomt in that it's wonderful to all be together. And thank you, Words Without Borders and Jennifer for getting everyone together. And this reading that she's about to read is from a novel And I'm going to confess that I did not write down fast enough to catch it all. But if you could help me out, what you want? Sorry, I'm so sorry.
The
Claro.
Golden Children of Sexual Alchemy is the novel.
Ajá. ¿Quieres, puedo repetir lo que comenté anteriormente? Esta chica tiene visiones del futuro cada vez que tiene relaciones sexuales con su novio y inicia una investigación sobre lo sobrenatural y lo paranormal para averiguar qué debe hacer con esta información, con estas premoniciones que ella tiene.
Okay, so the girl in the novel, the protagonist has visions of the future every time that she's with her boyfriend, and so she begins to investigate where those are going. And I'm so sorry.
No, está bien, creo que eso funciona. Muchas gracias, Julie. Entonces voy a leerles este capítulo, que es el número 17. Y se titula Vi curiosidad profesional. Ahora, mientras estoy cogiendo con Leo, las ideas esotéricas de complementariedad de los opuestos empiezan a sonarme conservadoras, dominantes y excluyentes. Shiva y Shakti, el lingam y el yoni, la serpiente y el loto. Hasta me da vergüenza haber apelado a ese argumento para interesar a Leo en mi investigación. Si los de Cosmos me escucharan hablar así, con todo el rollo inclusivo que manejamos en nuestro espacio. No llego al orgasmo esta vez por pensar en tantas cosas. Leo parece un poco molesto y no le falta razón. Se va a su lado de la cama y se duerme. Yo sigo pensando en el funcionamiento de la magia sexual. ¿Es realmente como un sistema electrónico que se acciona con polaridades opuestas? Como defensora de los derechos LGTBIQ, no puedo concebir la existencia de un don natural humano que deje afuera a algunos compañeros. 3 AM. Sin duda, esto califica ya como insomnio. Y es que estoy tratando de formular teoremas energéticos basados en otros principios físico-químicos. Después de todo, estudié 4 semestres de ingeniería química en la universidad. Siento que es muy relevante la tarea que me he propuesto. De pronto, en pleno amanecer, la turbulencia de mi mente se despeja y el sol ilumina poderosamente una hipótesis fascinante que no había considerado. Si la combinación de mi energía sexual con la energía sexual opuesta, masculina, da como resultado el futuro, la unión de mi energía con una energía homóloga, femenina, ¿con qué dimensión me confrontaría? ¿Con el pasado? Si nos ponemos en plan binario occidental, la antípoda del futuro es el tiempo anterior. Pero ¿cómo podría saber si las imágenes del pasado que me fueran reveladas durante el orgasmo homosexual habrían ocurrido en efecto? Tendría que sumar a esta labor de investigación y comprensión de mi proceso actual una de detective de eventos históricos previos, o la visualización correspondería a mi propia vida. Sería un flashback de mis vidas pasadas, de mi más tierna infancia, de mis días en el útero materno, o del pasado de ella. Pero, ¿quién es ella? ¿Quién sería? ¿Debería saberlo ya? ¿Y si lo descubro durante un coito con Leo? Haciendo el amor con Leo, ¿tendré visiones de la otra? ¿Leo me presentará sin saberlo a la persona con quien le seré infiel? Digno de telenovela. Debería hablarle a Leo de ella. Pero, ¿en qué momento decidí acostarme con una mujer? Ahora que lo pienso, fue en este preciso momento, en el presente andrógino. Y pasamos a Jacob Steinberg.
Quizá voy a poner las dos partes de Jacob como una tras otra. ¿Te parece?
Okay. Como prefieras.
Thank Words Without Borders and Susan and Jennifer.
I keep doing this.
So I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there live, but I'm so honored to be able to celebrate Tilsa's writing and help bring her into the English-speaking world. And I just want to also thank Words Without Borders and Susan and Jennifer for this opportunity. Professional by curiosity. Now, as I'm fucking Leo, esoteric ideas of the complementarity of opposites start to sound conservative, dominant, and exclusionary to me. Shiva and Shakti, the lingam and the yoni, the serpent and the lotus. I'm almost embarrassed I ever invoked that argument to bring Leo into my research. If the people from Cosmos heard me talk like this, with all the inclusive talk we have in our space, this time I can't orgasm because of all the thoughts in my head. Leo seems kind of annoyed, and he's not wrong to be. He moves over to his side of the bed and falls asleep. I keep thinking about the mechanics of sexual magic. Is it really like an electronic system powered by polar opposites? As a defender of LGBTQIA rights, I can't wrap my head around the existence of a natural human gift that would exclude some. 3 a.m. Undoubtedly, this counts as insomnia at this point. And it's because I'm trying to formulate energetic theorems based on other physiochemical principles. After all, I did take 4 semesters of chemical engineering in college. I feel the task I've taken up is quite relevant. At dawn, my mind's turbulence suddenly clears up, and the sun powerfully illuminates a fascinating hypothesis I hadn't considered. What if the combination of my sexual energy with the opposite, masculine sexual energy, yields the future as its byproduct? And with the union of my energy with homologous feminine energy, what dimension would I then face? The past? If we adopt a Western binary approach, the polar opposite of the future is time past. But how could we know if the images of the past revealed to me during a homosexual orgasm had indeed really happened? Must I add playing detective with past historical events to my task of researching and understanding my current process? Or could those visions pertain to my own life? Could they be a flashback to my own past selves, my tenderest infancy, my days in my mother's womb? Or could they be a flashback to her past? But who is she? Who could she be? Should I already know? And what if I find out during sex with Leo? Could I have visions of the other woman while making love to Leo? Could Leo unknowingly introduce me to the person I cheat on him with? Fit for a telenovela.
This is the second excerpt.
Visions I've recorded up to June 24th, 2018. Fewer than a fourth of all the visions I've had in the 5 months, 13 days I've been with Leo. I've seen a gray elephant walking down a main road carrying 3 Hindu youths on its back. I've seen a woman in an advanced stage of pregnancy dancing at a Zumba class. The whole wall was made of glass, so you could see her from the street. I've seen a whale explode on a beach in New Zealand. It was covered in blood and guts, surrounded by curious crowds. I've seen the Prime Minister of Israel step down over a corruption scandal. I've seen a series on the life of Luis Miguel on Netflix. I've seen a newspaper article on a war fought with high-speed boats, and on the facing page, a chewing gum ad, offering bicycles and a free flight to an island destination where people travel only by bicycle. I've seen a man who's going to buy a house visiting it for the first time, pointing out details that will require an investment to an agent, and jotting them down in a notebook. I've seen my Aunt Maria looking at photos from a distant journey, including one showing her with a Venezuelan missionary and a New World monkey in the gardens of Neuschwanstein Castle. I've seen parts of a telenovela where a domestic worker decides to run for president, and during her campaign, she falls in love with her top advisor. The relationship risks ruining the election of the young woman who ultimately does become the president, but tragically, she can't marry her advisor as it's against the law. I've seen an ethereal being whose body wavered between black and metallic blue, then dissolved in a small lagoon on a mountain in the Peruvian Andes. I've seen a huge caravan of very poor immigrants crossing Latin America. I've seen Leo naked and perched atop a leafy tree. I've seen a group of people, it looked like I was there too, in a dark cave, performing a strange ritual with shiny objects and sex toys. I've seen the neighborhood wrapped in missing posters for Ruby, my neighbor Natalia's puppy. I've seen Damon dying after being run over and dragged by a car on Angamos Avenue. I've seen the construction of the first evangelical church on Mars, executed by mini robots under human supervision. I've seen myself choosing Ferrero Rocher, muesli, and strawberry toppings for a frozen yogurt. I've seen an Italian neighborhood meeting convened to discuss... Sorry. I always laugh at this part. I've seen an Italian neighborhood meeting convened to discuss measures after a burglary in the building turned into an orgy that ended in fisticuffs when they found the burglar, who was the one who instigated the orgy in the first place. I've seen a pair of black leather pants hanging from the handle of a white door. Something like a Red Sea coming down from the sky.
Thank you, Tilsa and Jacob. Just a reminder to leave any questions you may have for the translators and writers in the chat. We'll be asking them after this. And as our grand finale, we have Michelle Har Kim reading her translations of 2 poems by José Watanabe. Michelle Har Kim is a Spanish to English translator of the Peruvian poet José Watanabe and a 2016 recipient of an NEA Translation Project grant. Her translations have appeared in Guernica, Shenandoah, and Epiphany. José Watanabe, 1946 to 2007, is one of Peru's most celebrated poets. Along with critical articles, children's books, and screenplays, Watanabe's oeuvre features 7 original volumes of poetry. Among them are the award-winning Cosas del Cuerpo and Banderas detrás de la niebla. Natural History, Michelle's translation of Watanabe's Historia Natural, is forthcoming from University of Georgia Press, and I'm so happy we get to hear some of that work here today.
Gracias, Jennifer. Con permiso, yo voy a compartir mi pantalla porque he estado trabajando en esto por años ya y hay una casi decepción en Watanabe porque es parece tan simple, pero no es. Okay, sorry, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that? Okay. La estación del Arenal. ¿Se ve? Ok. La prodigiosa lagartija corre y ya no la veo más. Oculta entre el color del médano, imperturbable, me observa mientras el halcón huye de la resolana y la reina cae suavemente desde las trombas de aire sobre nadie. Ningún ruido la inquieta. Huiría si resonara en el aire lo que confusamente está dentro de mí. Discrimino una campana, la estridencia de un tren y un bálido de ovejas sobre las espaldas de un viajero. Esta era la estación del Arenal. Queda un trecho de la vía desdibujada por la herrumbre. Un durmiente se quebra como una hojarasca y ninguna sombra. El desierto calcinó los ficus y sembró sus propias plantas de largas espinas que se ensañan en el esqueleto de una cabra. Aquí la única sustancia viva es la arena y nadie que duerma en las bancas rotas del andén la sacude de su sombrero. Abandono este lugar y yéndome siento una porosidad en mi propio cuerpo, una herencia. Aquí mi madre ofrecía su bandeja de frutas a los viajeros. La siento correr a mis espaldas como un cuerpo de arena que sin cesar se arma y se desintegra con su canasta. Perdón. The station of the stand. The prodigious lizard scampers, and I no longer see it. Hidden in the hue of the sand dune, imperturbable, it observes me as the falcon flies off from the glare of the sun, and sand falls gently from the whirls of air upon no one. No sound disturbs it. It would flee were the air to ring with what bewilders me inside. I make out a ting, the stridency of a train, and the bleat of a sheep on a passenger's shoulders. This used to be the station of these sands. What remains is a stretch of rail blurred by rust, a sleeping body crackling like a heap of leaves. and no shade in sight. The desert burnt away the ficus and seeded its own spindling plants that torment a goat skeleton. The one live substance here is the sand, and no one who sleeps on this platform's broken benches shakes it from his hat. I'm leaving this place, and as I go, I feel a porousness in my own body, an inheritance. Here my mother offered her wares of fruit to travelers. I feel her rush behind me, like a relentless body of sand, surging and disintegrating with her basket. It looks like we're kind of out of time, so I would like to just stop there. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Words Without Borders, Susan and Jennifer.
Susan, did you want to say a few words? I think your mic is off.
Did we have any questions from the audience? I think we can turn to the Q&A now.
For sure. Yeah, well, I think our audience is being shy, so feel free to pop those questions in the chat, and we have all the writers and translators here live to answer questions. So,
I know we've had a few people write in to say how much they were enjoying the readings. So, thank you for those comments. What other questions do you? Oh, here's one. Amazing readings. Thank you, authors and translators, for sharing your work with us. Other questions, and again, as Jennifer said, we have the rare advantage of having the authors and the translators here for your questions. I have a general question for the translators who worked with their authors. I'm curious to know, Jennifer, for example, what kind of interaction did you have with your authors? And you did so many of the translations for the issue.
Yeah, it varies from writer to writer. With Augusto, for example, I've met him a couple times, but I didn't directly consult him that much. Augusto Igaoshiro, whose story, Simple Heart, is an issue and that we didn't read today. But for example, with Julia, we were quite closely together. I always try to run translations by her before we publish them. And I consider her a friend, and feel really privileged to say that. So yeah, it really ranges. How about some of the other translators?
Julie, did you work with your how did you have interaction on The Last Stretch?
Yes, I did. In fact, this story, well, this collection is what inspired me to translate to begin with. I am a literature professor, and I started reading Asian Peruvian literature after going to a conference and hearing a lot of resonances with Mexican American literature and any other immigrant literature. And Siu Kam Wen, when he came to Sherman, Texas to visit the school and give a talk, he asked me to translate his collection. And I waited for a while and I said, I don't know if I'm the person, but he convinced me.
Great. And then did you work with him? Did you turn to him with questions about the translation, or was he pretty much hands off as an author?
I did ask him questions because we had met in person when I brought him here, and he, expressed so much confidence, and it was my first translation ever. I definitely took the advantage of having his email and having contact with him, and he was very generous and answered all my questions.
Julie, I think all of us are shocked to hear that was your first translation.
Yeah.
I think it was so good. For any of you who haven't had a chance to read Julie's translation of The Last Stretch, or indeed anything on the issue, please take a look at wordswithoutborders.org. Nicolas, what about you and Julio. Did you work, I think you got in, I know you two were in touch before the translation was published.
Yes, Julio and I collaborated on the translation quite a bit. He, the original in Spanish has such a distinctive voice that I was very grateful to be able to have Julio sort of read through the translation and make suggestions and edits. Some of them were very small, but kind of like significant. Like there's a moment where he says, "Esos ratos when I actually don't have the Spanish in front of me, but the translation that I originally wrote said, in his spare time, he likes to wear clothes. And Julio was like, no. In his spare time, he wears clothes. You know, it's not a question of liking or not. And so I was really grateful to have Julio's input for even small things like that, because I think that the final product is closer to the original than it would have been otherwise.
Interesting. Okay, we do have a question. Thank you, Nicolas. We do have a question from the audience, and Julia, it goes back to you. And the audience member asks, I was intrigued by what Julia said about translation being a meeting ground between the Peruvian, Chinese, and Japanese communities. Could you say more about these divides? And if translation into Asian languages has also played a part in shaping these literatures?
Well, I think the last 10 years, the world changed a lot, and the position of China in the global community also, the old conflict between Japanese and Chinese start to change in a positive direction. But I think English as a language made a big difference, because without English, I must say, English really is the global, the common ground. So it was possible because of English, because probably if you start with Chinese or Japanese or Spanish, you couldn't meet us in the same way English made us here. Because, for example, Sus and Julie, many of you are not Chinese or not Asians, not Asian Americans, or nothing to do with Asia. You have more interest in language, in English, in connections, in whatever, or in poetry, but not especially in the Asian issue. And I think to make this possible, you need many possible faces of the same language, you know? And I think probably English made it possible, because you have also this issue with connecting people, with doing these big things from the United States, maybe. All these things together was it possible, because sometimes in Peru we thought to make this kind of connection, but it never works out in the same way. And I think to make it really like this special meeting was because you work hard in many levels, language level, political level, peace issues, and everything, and history issues, you know. If not, it's not possible. Well, that's what I think. I don't know. Many other people have another. Michelle is from Korea, you know, and she translated Watas in Spanish. That's amazing. That to make this bridge from languages, cultures, that's only possible because of English, I think. Well,
thank you, Julia.
So, con permiso, like at the same time, Julia, like, don't you think it also has something to do with the privilege of English being spoken in the Anglosphere or the advanced industrialized nations? You know, I think that has a lot to do with it. And it's a privilege that I think is in a decrescendo, but it's still a privilege. And I think the difficulty in translation is admitting that sometimes, at least to an extent. But I know what you're saying.
Yeah. You're right.
I have a question. I wanted to hear another Wata poem, but I had a specific question from my friend Natalia. Michelle, you mentioned that there was something deceptively simple about the poem you read. What did you mean?
You know, Watanabe, all of his work is deceptively lucid, deceptively simple. And the more that he works so hard. He works so hard to shape and manage the small spaces of his poetry, and it appears so effortless. But as a translator, I've been dealing with some of these poems for years, looking up the same words again and again for years, talking to people about certain, the thematically, what's, you know, the other thing is, I realized this: in order to understand this man, I cannot work alone. First of all, my Spanish could be better. My English is okay, but I need to talk to others. Translation is not a job that one can just do by oneself. Impossible. And so every day I struggle with Watanabe. I learned that because of his apparent simplicity.
Michelle, I think you've answered another question from the audience, where someone was curious to know if you had particular problems not being able to consult the author since he is deceased. But it sounds as if you compensated by speaking with a lot of other translators and writers.
You know, those are two different worlds. Had I met him, maybe everything would have been different, but I never was able to. And so I visited Peru the year after he passed.
Oh. And
I still am so sad.
It is a shame, but again, thank you. You know, we do have requests. Do you have one more poem that you could read?
I do.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, just one. Shall I do both languages or just one language?
Just the English, why don't you?
Just the English. Okay, you got it. Okay. I'm going to, para los hispanohablantes, yo voy a compartir la pantalla con dos idiomas de nuevo. Perdón. Thank you everybody for asking. Okay, here, I'm gonna be on the right side over here.
Great poem.
This poem is, to me, anyway. Mama turned 75. 5 kuis have fallen, slaughtered, sacrificed at your aged queen's feet. Blood always celebrates your birthday. Receive it in a bowl, where it can congeal into a brilliant sign, as it may on the blade. The light bulb coincides with your sleeping head and exalts you. We begin loving you with certain piety, but your eyes open quickly as if forewarned, reviving in them an animal of harshest tenderness. Your withered eyes of enfolded skin are the unscathed remainder of the central character you were among us. When tall and upright, you stretched the lamp into the darkness, calling out in whispers to no one. The shadows at the wall and the cats past the awful border were innocent. You, Senora, were the fear. 5 kuis will soon be served at the table. Others were for the rite of healing, with open and sentient entrails to reveal our illnesses. These are for teeth, our prey. They will not say that you are our oldest malady.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for the encore.
Thank you, everybody. This is great.
Okay, let's see, we have a couple more questions. We have a general question, a question for all of the translators. Oh, Michelle, what are, we do have a question. What are cuyas? Whoops.
She's muted.
Oh, disculpen. So cuis are guinea pigs.
Ah,
And there's beautiful dishes in Peru where you eat them and they are so good. So that's what they are. There's a tradition. It's not even a tradition is the wrong word. It's just culturally, you go out, you want some cuy, you go get some cuy chactao. It's delicious. It's better than chicken.
I think part of the audience is a little skeptical about this dish, Michelle, but we will take your word. We will take your word for it.
Oh, please do. I wouldn't lie to you.
Thank you. We have another a question for any of the translators, which is, were there what difficulties, were there any difficulties did you have in translating specific cultural references to Tucson, again, there are always questions about translating specific references, but were there problems with translating connotations or references from Tucson or Nikkei experience into English, into American English? Any of you translators, like Julie?
I'll tell you that the hardest word for me in the whole collection was huachapa. And I talked to I have many Peruvian friends, huachapa. And I talked to many of them, and it was so hard to figure, because it means so many things in so many different, it can be a harebrained idea, it can be a dumb idea, but it never sounded good enough in English. Yeah.
What did you finally decide?
Oh, and you know what? It's a different. I think I settled on harebrained in the particular context that the story was in. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that was the right idea, Julie.
I'm not happy with it. But.
Any of the other translators want to weigh in on this question?
I can say that it's not necessarily a cultural reference, and I actually haven't run this by Julia, but I believe the last line of El Gallo Rojo, the Red Rooster, is an allusion to Watanabe's work, La Piedra Alada, and I thought about how I would make that clear. I looked up the translation of that title into English, and I was like, how do I make this really explicit? But I ended up just sticking closer to the original, because I was like, well, even if I make the connection really clear, probably a lot of people won't have come across this book before. So yeah, hopefully people recognize who have. And also, if I could steal Margaret's thunder, I want to say that I love the title of the collection that Margaret's translations come from, of Doris's collection. It's called Diario de la Mujer Esponja. And that is, I do not envy whoever has to translate that, because esponja means sponge as one word, but Doris has made it two words, esponja. And ponja, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of a slur for Japanese descendant people. Yeah, so, it could be the diary of the sponge woman, or it could be the diary of, insert slur woman. And whoever has to figure that out, I don't envy you the task.
Oh. Jennifer, we have a question for you from the audience. Again, this project has been in the making for what, minimally 3 years. I think it was at least 2 years ago that you and I spoke about it at Alta. How does it feel to have the issue up and out and celebrating with this event?
Feels really great, and I'm so glad that that we got to have all this wonderful writing in the issue, translated so beautifully by the translators. I just feel, I'm super proud of all the work that's in the issue. And grateful for Words Without Borders, and it's been such a wonderful opportunity to work with you, and I've really enjoyed working with the whole team. So
wonderful, thank you. Well, we are pretty much need to wrap up, but again, thank you all for coming. We want to mention again, that the issue is up on the site at wordswithoutborders.org. Please check it out if you'd like to reread what you heard tonight. Again, if you also, Words Without Borders is a nonprofit organization. Should you be moved to donate, we would welcome anything you would like to donate, and you can find that information also you can find that link in the chat as well. So thank you very much. Thank all of you for attending. Thank all of you authors and translators again, and let us celebrate this fabulous selection of Asian Peruvian writing and celebrate Jennifer for bringing it all together.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Gracias.